Hell on Earth has a sound, it has a smell, and it has a setting that few men survived to describe. Explosions tearing through the sky, screams echoing among bodies scattered across the ground, bullets crossing the air without stopping. And in the middle of all this, where any wrong step means instant death, there is a man completely alone, without a weapon, without protection, without any way to defend himself. While everyone else retreats, he advances. While everyone runs, he stays. And at that moment, on top of a cliff more than 100 meters high, under constant enemy fire, he does something no soldier was trained to do. He decides to go back to the place everyone was trying to escape, back to the heart of hell, not to fight, but to save. One by one, man by man, carrying bodies, dragging the wounded, feeling the explosions getting closer and closer. And even so, every time he lowers a soldier down with the improvised rope, he doesn't stop. He doesn't think about himself. He doesn't go down with them. He just looks again at that scene of destruction, takes a deep breath, and repeats a phrase that would become eternal. Lord, help me save one more. And then he goes back, again, and again, and again. That night, on that battlefield, that man saved dozens of soldiers alone, without firing a single shot, without taking a single life. And the most absurd part is that he wasn't even supposed to be there, because from the beginning, he was considered a mistake, a problem, a soldier who didn't belong in war, humiliated, despised, pressured to quit. A man who refused to do the one thing every soldier was required to do: pick up a weapon. And even so, it was exactly this man who went down in history as one of the greatest war heroes of the United States. The kind of story that seems made up, exaggerated, impossible, but that is completely real. Because before that battlefield, before the fame, before the medal, there was only a boy who made a promise he never broke, not even when the entire world was at war. Before there was a battlefield, before the explosions, before the world knew his name, there was only a boy, an ordinary boy, born in 1919 in a small town in Virginia in the United States. A boy who grew up in a simple home, but surrounded by something that would completely change his destiny: principles, faith, and an idea that seemed simple, but that, in the future, would clash directly with the most brutal war in history. That boy was named Desmond Doss, son of a carpenter who had fought in World War I and of a deeply religious mother. It was inside that house that everything began, because while his father carried the traumas of war within him, his mother did everything possible to protect her children from the violence of the world, teaching values that went completely against what the world would live through years later. She taught compassion, helping others, and especially a commandment that would stay forever in Desmond's mind: "Thou shalt not kill." That was not just a religious teaching. It was something he took seriously, something he absorbed so deeply that it became part of his identity. But the moment that would truly change everything did not happen in church, did not happen in a classroom. It happened inside his own home, on a night that could have ended in tragedy. His father, psychologically marked by the war, often sought refuge in alcohol, trying to escape memories that never left him, until, in a moment of loss of control, an argument began. The tension rose, and suddenly, a gun appeared. pointed directly at a member of his own family. In that instant, everything could have ended there. But it didn't, because it was young Desmond who intervened, who stepped into that situation, who managed to stop the worst. And it was in that moment, looking at that gun, seeing up close what it was capable of doing, that he made a silent decision, a promise no one there could imagine the weight it would carry. He decided he would never touch a weapon again. Never. No matter the situation, no matter the context. That decision seemed simple for a boy. But years later, when the world plunged into war, that promise would be tested in a way no one could imagine. And as he grew, Desmond did not become a rebel. He did not become isolated. On the contrary, he became someone known for helping, for serving, for always being willing to care for others. He learned first aid, helped neighbors, donated blood, did everything to be ready to save lives, not destroy. Save, while the world slowly moved toward the chaos of World War II. He was building something different. He was preparing, without knowing it, for a kind of battle that did not involve weapons, but that would require even more courage. Because when the attack on Pearl Harbor happened, and the United States officially entered the war, thousands of young men rushed to enlist, driven by patriotism, anger, or simply duty. And Desmond, even having the option to stay, even being able to avoid all of that, made a decision no one expected. He also stepped forward, not to fight, not to kill, but to serve, to save lives. Because inside him, that promise was still alive, and he was willing to take it to the very end, even if that meant entering a place where that decision made no sense at all. War. When Desmond Doss joined the Army, he did not enter as a hero. He entered as a problem, a foreign body inside a machine that only worked one way: fight, obey, and kill if necessary. And from the first day, it was clear he did not fit there. While all the other soldiers received their weapons, trained shooting, learned to react under pressure, Desmond did something no one could understand. He simply refused. He said calmly, without raising his voice, without confrontation, that he would not touch a weapon, that he would not carry a rifle, that he would not take anyone's life, and that inside a military environment was seen as weakness, as cowardice, as a threat. Because in the minds of the other soldiers, a man unwilling to fight was a man who put everyone at risk. And that's when the real hell of his life began. Not on the battlefield, but inside the army itself. The provocations started small. Looks, comments, laughs, but quickly turned into something much heavier. Objects being thrown while he prayed, constant insults, isolation, contempt, men who slept beside him, who trained with him, who should trust him, began to hate him. And it didn't take long for his superiors to start pressuring him too, because for them, it made no sense. How to trust a soldier who refused to carry a weapon? How to send this man to war? How to place him alongside others who would depend on him? And it was at this moment that an important figure appears. Captain Jack Glover, an experienced man, rigid, direct, and who did not accept that kind of behavior. For him, Desmond Doss was not just a problem. He was the weakest link, someone who needed to be removed at any cost. Glover tried everything, pressured, threatened, tried to break his resistance, even took him to a court-martial for disobeying direct orders, all to force Desmond to quit, to leave. to abandon that absurd idea. But what no one there understood is that it was not stubbornness, not pride, not fear, it was conviction. And that changes everything, because a man can give in to pressure, can break under threat. But when there is a deep belief behind it, when it is part of who he is, there is no force strong enough to make him quit. And that is exactly what happened. Even being humiliated, even being isolated, even being treated as a failure, Desmond did not back down, did not change, did not negotiate his principles. And in one of the most striking moments, he made that clear, looking directly at his superior and saying something that would echo far beyond that training. Never doubt my courage, because while you take lives, I will be by your side, saving them. At that moment, no one believed. No one took it seriously. To everyone there, it sounded like empty words, because in war, courage meant shooting, advancing, eliminating the enemy, not saving, but time. Time would prove they were completely wrong. The training field was over, and now there was no more theory, no more discussion, no more space for opinions. Because when war truly begins, everything changes. The noise is louder, the fear is more real, and every decision starts to cost a life, or several. And it was at that moment that Desmond Doss stopped being just the soldier who didn't carry a weapon and began to be truly tested. Sent with the 77th Infantry Division to the Pacific Front, he arrived at a completely different scenario from anything he had experienced before. Suffocating heat, dense jungle, uneven terrain, and an enemy that gave no rest, that attacked without warning, that knew every inch of that land, and that had a clear strategy: destroy as much as possible, especially the medics, because hitting those who save lives breaks the morale of any troop. And it was exactly in that environment that Desmond began to show something no one expected, because while bullets crossed the air, while explosions shook the ground, while experienced soldiers took cover trying to survive, he did the opposite. He stood up, ran toward the wounded, threw himself into the middle of the chaos, completely ignoring the fact that he had no weapon, no way to defend himself, only a helmet, a medical bag, and a decision to save whoever was there, no matter the distance, no matter the risk. And that is how, even in the first operations, he began to change how he was seen, because it was no longer theory, no longer words. They were actions. Real, visible, undeniable. In the middle of machine gun fire, he ran dozens of meters to rescue fallen soldiers, carrying men much heavier than him, dragging wounded bodies while bullets passed centimeters away, treating injuries right there on the ground, with calm, precision, as if the chaos around him simply did not exist. And that began to draw attention, because the same men who once threw objects at him now started to look at him differently, still with doubt, still without fully understanding, but no longer able to deny what they were seeing. Courage. A different kind of courage. Silent, but immense, and it kept repeating. It was not a single moment. In Guam, in Leyte, in the Philippines, the scene was always the same. Intense combat, casualties, cries for help, and Desmond appearing in the middle of it all, as if he were drawn to danger, as if the worse the situation, the more he felt in the right place. And in one of those situations, he ran about 90 meters under direct enemy fire to reach 2 wounded soldiers. One of them was already dead when he arrived. But the other was still breathing, and without thinking twice, he placed the man on his back and returned, crossing that hell again, carrying not only the physical weight, but the responsibility of not letting another life be lost. And he succeeded, once again, and then again, and again, until it stopped being a surprise and became expected. Because now, when someone fell, when someone cried for help, everyone knew. If there was still a chance, Desmond Doss would appear, and that is exactly what changed everything. Because in war, trust is everything. And that man who was once seen as the weakest link was now becoming one of the most reliable, the kind of person you wanted nearby when everything went wrong, the kind of person who would not abandon you, even if it cost his own life. And it was for these actions, repeated, constant, risky, that he received his first decorations, 2 Bronze Stars, official recognition for bravery. But more important than any medal was the respect, real respect, earned in the worst possible environment, where there is no lie, where there is no pretending. Either you prove it or you disappear. And Desmond Doss was proving, day after day, that he was not just a different soldier. He was something much rarer, someone willing to enter hell without any weapon and come out bringing others back. But even after all that, after already showing who he was, the worst was still to come. Because nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared that division for what they would find in Okinawa, the place where this story would stop being impressive and become simply unbelievable. Okinawa was not just another battle. It was the place where war stopped being strategy and became pure survival. A scenario where every meter gained cost blood, where the enemy did not retreat, did not surrender, and turned every piece of land into a deadly field. And it was exactly there, in front of a rocky formation nearly 100 meters high, that American soldiers faced what seemed to be an impossible obstacle. The Maeda Escarpment, an almost vertical wall surrounded by bunkers, machine gun nests, and fortified Japanese positions. A place where any attempt to advance was met with a storm of bullets, explosions, death. The soldiers gave that place a name, Hacksaw Ridge, because those who climbed often did not come back down. It was like a saw cutting men in half. And even so, the mission was clear. Climb, take the top, and open the path forward. And that is how it began. Ropes being thrown, soldiers climbing under enemy fire, explosions lighting the sky, screams echoing along the slope, men being hit before even reaching the top. And still, they kept climbing until they finally made it. They reached the top. But what they found was not victory. It was hell, a rain of artillery, mortars exploding around them, machine guns firing non-stop, bodies falling, soldiers trying to take cover without success. And in just a few minutes, the situation went completely out of control. The order was given: retreat, go down, get out of there immediately, because staying in that place meant death. And that is exactly what most did. They went down the ropes, trying to survive, trying to escape, trying to get back. But in the middle of that desperate retreat, someone stayed, a single man, Desmond Doss. He looked around, saw the bodies, heard the screams, realized that there were still men alive up there. Wounded men, abandoned, waiting for help. And in that moment, he made the decision that would change everything. He did not go down. He stayed, alone, on top of Hacksaw Ridge, surrounded by the enemy, without a weapon, without protection, only with his faith and his mission to save. And then began something that still seems impossible today. He ran from one side to another, crawled across the ground, found the first wounded, treated him as best he could, lifted him, dragged him to the edge of the cliff, improvised a rope system, tied the man, and began to lower him slowly, centimeter by centimeter, holding all the weight, until he saw that soldier reach safety below. He could have gone down with him. Anyone would have gone down, but he didn't. He pulled the rope back, looked behind, took a deep breath, and said, "Lord, help me save one more." And he went back, again, found another, repeated the process, lowered one more, and went back, and back, and back. Each trip was a risk. Each step could be the last. Bullets passing beside him, explosions nearby, enemies trying to locate him, but he simply did not stop. There was no fatigue, no fear greater than the mission. Just one man against the chaos, saving one by one, men heavier than him, unconscious men, severely wounded men, and still he continued, one every 10 minutes, one with every new prayer, one with every return, until the impossible happened. Dozens of soldiers, all alive, all pulled out of that hell, thanks to a single man. And when finally there was no one left, when silence began to replace the noise of battle, when the last man was lowered, he stopped, alone, on top of that escarpment, alive, against all odds. But the war was not finished with him yet, because days later, he would return to that same place, to face the chaos once again. And this time, the price would be even higher. The war ended, but for Desmond Doss, the battle was far from over, because there are wounds that do not show. There are scars that are not on the skin, and there are consequences that follow a man long after the last shot is fired. When he left Okinawa, he did not leave as a common soldier. He left as someone who had faced the impossible, someone who survived where many did not. But the price was high, far higher than anyone could imagine. His body was destroyed, shrapnel, broken bones, constant pain. But the worst was still to come, because during the war, he contracted tuberculosis, a disease that, at that time, was practically a sentence. Years of treatment followed, years fighting again for his own life, 5.5 years, until doctors made an extreme decision to remove one lung, 5 ribs, parts of his body sacrificed so he could keep living. And even then, it was not the end. An overdose of antibiotics affected his hearing, leaving him completely deaf for a period. Imagine that. A man who survived the hell of war, who faced bullets, explosions, grenades, now facing absolute silence, a new battle, completely different. But still, he continued, because giving up was never part of his story. And while all this was happening, the world began to understand, to recognize what that man had truly done. Because what happened at Hacksaw Ridge was not just courage, it was something beyond, something that could not be ignored. And that is how the highest recognition came, the highest military decoration in the United States, the Medal of Honor, an honor reserved for acts of extreme bravery, acts that go far beyond duty. And on October 21st, 1945, in the gardens of the White House, before authorities, soldiers, and witnesses, President Harry Truman placed that medal around Desmond Doss's neck. And in that moment, something became clear. The man who was humiliated, rejected, considered weak, had proven to everyone that they were completely wrong. And more than that, he had redefined what courage means. Because courage is not just facing the enemy with a weapon. Courage is holding on to your principles when everything around you tries to destroy them. Courage is continuing when no one else continues. Courage is choosing to save when the entire world is focused on destroying. And after the war, Desmond tried to return to a normal life, built his own home, lived simply, raised his son, helped his community, always away from the spotlight, because he never sought recognition, never wanted fame. Everything he did was because he believed, because he felt it was right. And even after losing his wife years later, even after so many difficulties, he continued living with the same faith, the same humility, the same purpose. Until in 2006, at 87 years old, his journey came to an end, but his story did not. Because there are stories that do not belong only to the past. There are stories that cross generations, that inspire, that challenge, that make us question what it really means to be strong. And the story of Desmond Doss is exactly that. Proof that a single man, with a decision, can change everything, can save lives, can enter history without ever pulling a trigger. And maybe that is the greatest lesson of all, because in the middle of chaos, in the middle of war, in the middle of destruction, there is still space for humanity. There is still space for real courage, the kind that does not need a weapon, only a choice. And you, would you have the courage to do the same?